The air was full of smoke and dust. The ground of Carthia was broken, black, and wet with rain and blood. Fires burned in the distance where machines of war had fallen. It was the kind of place where hope came to die, but a lonely soldier still moved among the wreckage. His name was Ethan Ward. His uniform was torn, his arm bandaged with cloth that had once been white. He was tired, hungry, and half lost. The sky above him was red, yet he still searched for life among the dead. That was what he had learned in war, to keep moving until the heart said stop. Ethan heard a soft sound. At first he thought it was the wind, but then it came again, weak and slow. It was a woman's voice calling for help. He ran through the smoke and found a broken royal convoy, a carriage burnt from one side. He moved closer, holding his rifle, expecting an enemy trap. But what he found made him drop the gun at once. Inside the wreckage lay a young woman. Her golden gown was torn and covered with dust. Around her neck was a small silver crest with the royal mark. Ethan stared in shock. The woman was Princess Evelyn of the Northern Dominion, the future queen of the realm.
Oh.
Everyone had heard her name. She was the reason many soldiers still fought, believing peace would come if she survived. Ethan's soldier heart kicked in. He rushed to her side and checked her pulse. It was faint, her skin cold, her lips pale. A wound on her shoulder was leaking dark poison. He had seen the same injury kill men in minutes. The toxin spread fast, and no field medicine could stop it. He looked around. The guards of the princess were all gone. Their bodies lay still in the mud. The royal convoy had been attacked, maybe by rebels or by their own soldiers who had turned. No support would come in time. She was alone. He lifted her carefully and carried her to a fallen concrete wall that gave a little cover from the wind and rain. He tore his sleeve, cleaned her wound as best he could, and opened his medkit. The air smelled of smoke and iron. His mind worked fast. He knew he could not just watch her die. But what could he do? He remembered something from training. Some toxins had been known to destroy blood cells, but there were rare cases where pure blood could fight the poison itself. It was crazy, almost useless to try without proper machines, but he had nothing else. He looked at his own arm, then at the line of 4 tubes in his pack. "Guess this is how legends start, huh?" he said quietly to no one and everyone. He tied a piece of cloth above his elbow, pushed the needle into his skin, and watched red blood fill the small tube. Then he connected it to her arm, making sure the flow stayed steady. Minutes passed like hours. There was no sound except the beating of rain on steel. The princess's breathing slowed, then steadied. Her pulse, which had nearly stopped, came back faint first, then stronger. Ethan almost laughed. He could not believe it was working. He wiped the mud from her face and waited. When she opened her eyes, the storm outside lit her face for a second. As her eyes met his, confused but alive. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came. "You saved me," she said. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet, princess." Still a long night ahead. He did not know how long the blood could hold her, but he stayed there, feeding warmth into her hand. His world had been full of orders and battles, yet one act of human kindness now felt more powerful than all the wars he had fought. He moved her closer to the fire he made from broken wood. Her skin soon lost its blue tint. When the first light of dawn broke through the dust clouds, she was asleep, but breathing evenly. Ethan looked around the ruined world and sighed. The war had taken everything from him, brothers, peace, even the meaning of winning. But in that moment, seeing the princess alive, he felt something new, something worth fighting for. He whispered softly, "If blood is what keeps you alive, then take mine. Maybe it can buy this world one more day of hope." From far away, the rumble of engines told him the enemy might return. He prepared his weapon again, glancing at the resting princess. She was fragile but filled with some quiet strength that amazed him. That night would later be remembered as the start of a story no one would ever forget, a story that began with a wounded soldier, a dying princess, and one impossible choice that changed everything. In that small corner of a broken battlefield, between smoke and silence, hope was reborn. Morning came cold and quiet. The fires on the battlefield were almost gone, leaving only smoke drifting across the mud. Ethan woke up slowly, stiff and tired, his back against a piece of broken wall. He looked over at the princess. Her face was calm now, her breathing smooth. She looked almost peaceful, as if she had never been close to death. He checked the line that had carried his blood into her arm. It was empty now, but her color had returned. The strange dark mark around her wound was beginning to fade. He could not explain it, but a part of him felt lighter, connected to her somehow, as if some small piece of his life now lived inside her. Ethan poured water from his canteen and cleaned his own arm. It burned from the cut, but that pain felt good. It told him he was still alive. The princess moved and opened her eyes. For a second, she looked like she was trying to remember who she was or what had happened. Then her gaze landed on Ethan. "You are the soldier," she said weakly. "You gave me your blood." Ethan scratched the back of his neck and tried not to smile. Yes, well, it was the only thing I had left to give. She tried to sit up, but he stopped her gently. "Rest. You've lost a lot of strength." She studied him curiously, her eyes bright, even in the dull gray of morning. "You saved me when everyone else was gone." "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Because you were alive." "What?" That was reason enough. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled softly, something warm breaking through the cold air. "You are a strange soldier." He laughed quietly. "That's what my captain used to say." They spent the next few hours hiding in the ruins. The sound of engines echoed far away, and Ethan knew they had to move before the enemy patrols returned. He found food in a broken satchel, half-burned bread and a few dry rations. It wasn't much, but the princess ate without complaint. When she tried to stand, Ethan held her arm to steady her. It surprised him how steady she already was. Most people after such a wound would still be too weak to move. Something about her recovery didn't feel normal, but he pushed the thought aside. As they began to walk toward the forest, Ethan noticed animals watching from the tree-lined deer, small birds, even a fox. None of them ran away. The princess moved with quiet grace, and everything around her seemed at peace. When they reached a stream to rest, Ethan washed the dirt from his face. He looked at her reflection in the water. The faint blue glow in her eyes startled him for a moment, but when she blinked, it vanished. She caught him staring and smiled again. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just making sure the poison's really gone." She laughed gently, and the sound reminded him of a bell ringing after a long silence. But the peace did not last long. As they crossed deeper into the woods, Ethan spotted soldiers in the distance. They carried no banner, and their armor looked rough. He pulled the princess down behind a fallen tree. "Rebels," he whispered. "We can't let them see you." For hours they hid, moving quietly until night fell again. When they finally stopped, Evelyn turned to him with tired eyes. "I owe you my life," she said. "My mother will want to see you rewarded for it." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't do it for rewards, princess. I did it because I couldn't watch someone die when I could help." She looked at him for a long moment. "Still, you must come with me to the capital when this is over. You deserve to be known." He smiled faintly. "I'm not sure your noble friends would agree." "Then I will make them," she said with quiet fire. They built a small fire to keep warm, careful not to let the flames grow too bright. Ethan told her about his small hometown, about the fields and rivers where he had played as a boy. She listened like someone hearing a story for the first time. When she spoke of her life, it was clear how lonely it had been behind castle walls, surrounded by people who called her Highness but never called her friend. In that night's silence, something gentle grew between them. Not love yet, but trust. When morning came again, they continued walking. Suddenly, Evelyn stopped. Her hand went to her heart. "I can hear them," she whispered. "Hear who?" Ethan asked. "The soldiers near us? Can feel their hearts beating." Ethan looked at her in confusion. She closed her eyes and pointed east. "They're hiding there, waiting." He followed her direction, and sure enough, spotted movement between the trees. She had sensed it before he did. Ethan stared at her. That should be impossible. She looked back, her eyes clear and steady. "Then something inside me has changed." And in that moment, Ethan knew her recovery was more than healing. It was a beginning of something far greater, something no human had ever seen. The sun pushed through the trees, and the two of them walked on toward the unknown. unaware that their strange bond would soon shake kingdoms and rewrite history. It had been 5 days since Ethan and Princess Evelyn escaped the battlefield. They had walked through forests, crossed rivers, and hidden from patrols that searched for survivors. The nights were cold, and their food was running low, but they kept moving. They both knew that the capital was still far away, and danger could be waiting anywhere. Ethan often watched the princess as they walked. She was not the same person he had found dying in the mud. Her step was strong now, her eyes calm, and she seemed to sense things before they happened. Another time she warned him to move seconds before a broken tree branch nearly fell on them. Each time she was right. He couldn't explain it. "You feel things before they happen," he said one night. "No one can do that." Evelyn looked at the stars and spoke softly. "Maybe something inside me changed when you gave me your blood," Ethan tried to joke. "Well, I always said my blood was stubborn. Maybe it just refuses to lose." She smiled, but both of them knew it was more than that. The night grew quiet again, except for the crackle of the small fire they had built. The warmth touched their faces, and for a short time, the world around them felt peaceful. As dawn came, they reached the edge of a destroyed village. Houses were broken, the streets full of ash. They moved carefully, hoping to find water or food. Ethan knocked open a door to an old shop. Inside, they found a few tins of dried fruit and a cracked jug of clean water. While they ate, they heard horses outside. Ethan looked through a hole in the wall and saw soldiers with the royal mark on their armor. Relief washed over him. "We're safe," he whispered. But the soldiers did not look friendly. Their eyes were cold, their movements sharp. One of them shouted, "Search the buildings. Bring out anyone you find." Ethan's relief faded fast. These soldiers were not rescuers, they were trackers. Someone had told them the princess lived, and the council wanted her back under strict control. Before the soldiers could reach the shop, Ethan and Evelyn ran out the back. They dashed through a narrow alley and hid behind an overturned cart. Horses thundered by only a few meters away. "Why would they hunt you?" Ethan whispered. Evelyn looked down. "Because they fear what I have become. My mother's council will not understand. They will think it is dark magic or some forbidden science." Her voice trembled slightly. "If they find you, they might harm you too." Ethan stared at her. "You think I'm afraid of them, after what we've survived?" She looked at him, and for the first time, her eyes shone with something like tears. "You should be. I cannot let them take you." They moved again that night, following an old railway that led toward the capital. The journey was long, but the air smelled of grass instead of smoke, and that gave them hope. Still, Evelyn's power was growing stronger. She began to sense the thoughts of others nearby, like a whisper in her mind. It frightened her. At one point, she stopped walking and said to Ethan, "I can feel them behind us. 3 riders. They will reach us by sunrise." Ethan gripped his weapon, and "We will be ready." By dawn, the sound of hooves filled the air. 3 armored riders appeared on the hill. Ethan stood in front of the princess, rifle raised. The riders slowed when they saw them. The one in front lifted his visor. "It's by order of Queen Marielle, you are to come with us." The princess stepped forward. "Tell my mother I will come when I am ready." The soldier shook his head. "Those are not our orders." Without warning, he drew his sword. Before Ethan could react, Evelyn raised her hand, and a wave of force pushed the riders backward. The horses reared, terrified. The soldiers fell into the dirt disarmed. Ethan stared, mouth open. "How did you do that?" Evelyn's hand shook. "I don't know. Just happened." The riders scrambled away, too afraid to fight. The ground stayed still again, quiet except for her quick breathing. Ethan touched her arm gently. "You saved us again." She met his eyes. "I feel power in me, but it frightens me, Ethan. What if I lose control?" He gave her a steady look. "Then I'll be here to remind you who you are. You're still human, Evelyn. You're still you." They continued walking as the sun rose high. The capital's white towers finally appeared in the far distance, shining through the smoke and mist. Ethan whispered, "Almost home." But Evelyn did not smile. She knew the hardest part was still ahead. The kingdom that waited for them was not the same one she had left behind. Secrets, fear, and strange power followed with every step she took. She looked at her protector and said quietly, "When we reach the gates, Nothing will ever be the same again, and she was right. The gift of his blood had begun a change that neither of them could stop. The path to the capital was long and full of old ruins. The sun stood high when Ethan and Princess Evelyn reached the edge of the great city. From far away, the white towers looked bright and peaceful, but closer, it was clear that the place was tense with fear. Soldiers guarded every gate, checking everyone who tried to enter. Banners of the royal family hung over the stone walls, waving in the wind. Evelyn covered her face with a shawl and pulled her hood low. Ethan walked beside her, carrying his rifle over his shoulder, pretending to be a weary escort. When the guards at the gate stopped them, Evelyn spoke in a quiet, calm voice. "We are travelers," she said. "We seek food and shelter." The guard looked tired and suspicious, but he waved them in. Once they were inside, Ethan exhaled slowly. "We made it," he whispered. Still, Evelyn's heart was uneasy. Everything about the city felt wrong. The people in the streets did not smile. Shops were closed early, and soldiers marched everywhere. Rumors floated through the air like smoke rumors about the princess's death, about a coming war, about strange signs in the sky. No one knew the truth. That night, Ethan found a small inn on the edge of the market square. They paid for a tiny room with the last of their coins. Evelyn sat by the window, watching the moonlight touch the old rooftops. Ethan cleaned his weapon on the floor beside her. "When we go to the palace tomorrow," he said quietly, "what should I say?" She hesitated. "Say only that the princess is alive and seeks her mother. Nothing more. And if they try to take you away from me..." She turned to him with steady eyes. "Then you don't fight them. You survive." But Ethan shook his head. "I didn't T-cross half a country just to hand you over to people who might lock you away." She looked away, a faint trace of sadness in her smile. "You are braver than you should be." The next morning, they made their way to the palace. The gates were tall, guarded by men in golden armor. When they saw Evelyn's face, the guards froze in shock. One of them ran inside shouting, "The princess lives!" Moments later, Queen Marielle herself appeared at the top of the marble steps. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw her daughter. She hurried down and embraced her tightly. "Evelyn, my child," she whispered. "We thought you were gone." Evelyn held her mother close. "I survived, Mother, because of him." She turned and gestured to Ethan, who stood silently a few steps away. The Queen's eyes moved to him. Her voice softened, but held firm authority. "You saved my daughter's life." "Yes, Your Majesty," Ethan said. Though it was luck, more than skill. The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "You will come with us." In the palace halls, healers examined Evelyn, but found no trace of the poison. They were confused by her perfect health, even stronger now than before. One of them whispered that the gods must have blessed her. Another shook his head and said, "This is no blessing, it is something else." Meanwhile, soldiers surrounded Ethan, watching him closely. They didn't say a word, but he could feel their suspicion. When the council gathered the next day, whispers filled the courtroom. The eldest advisor spoke. A common soldier gave his blood to the heir of the crown. That act is forbidden by ancient law. Such mixing is against every rule of the realm. Queen Marielle looked up sharply. "Forbidden or not, my daughter lives because of him," another advisor said, "and now she has changed. We do not know what power sleeps in her veins. If this soldier's blood has done something unnatural, we must study him." Evelyn rose to her feet. "You will not cage him like an animal. He saved me. If you call it unnatural, then call me unnatural as well." The room fell silent. The Queen looked at the council and said, "Leave us." When the chamber was empty, she turned to Ethan. "They fear what they do not understand." "My daughter speaks truly. You have changed her. The question is how?" Ethan met her eyes. "She changed me too." The Queen paused, surprised by his honesty. Then she sighed. "There will be unrest when people learn you live, Evelyn. They think your death was the reason for war. Now your return will shake every house in this kingdom. A soldier who shares his blood with a royal. It will frighten them even more." Evelyn stepped forward. "Then we must show them there is nothing to fear." The Queen nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but be careful. Power always makes enemies." That night, Evelyn stood on her balcony, the moon shining on the palace gardens. Ethan stood silently nearby. "Do you ever wish you had left me there to die?" she asked quietly. He answered without hesitation, "Oh, because saving you saved me too." She looked down at the city below. "Tomorrow, the people must see I am alive. They must believe in something again. And you, Ethan Ward, will stand beside me." He wanted to argue, but her voice carried a strength even he could not defy. Below them, the city lights glimmered like fallen stars. Both of them knew that the days ahead would bring storms, but for now, they stood together, soldier and princess, bound by one act of impossible courage that neither fate nor fear could undo. The next morning, the palace was full of noise. Bells rang through the city, and messengers ran through the streets, shouting that the princess was alive. People came from every corner of the capital to see her. Flags returned to the walls, and for a moment it felt as if peace had come back. But deep inside the council building, fear still lived behind proud faces. Ethan stood quietly beside the princess during the first public gathering. The grand courtyard of the palace was filled with thousands of people. Queen Marielle stood high on the marble steps with her daughter at her side. When Evelyn stepped forward, the crowd gasped. She spoke in a clear voice, so all could hear. "My people, I have returned. I live because of a man who risked everything. I live because kindness is stronger than war." Her words rolled across the square, reaching even the poorest workers in the far corners. Ethan kept his face calm, but his heart beat fast. He did not like standing before so many eyes, but when the princess looked at him and smiled, the noise around them faded. The queen placed her hand on Evelyn's shoulder and turned to the crowd. "This soldier gave his blood to save your princess. He is not a royal, yet he did what no royal thought possible. From this day, he will be known as the guardian of the crown." The people cheered. For the first time in years, their voices carried joy instead of sorrow. But not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the hallways, members of the council whispered that the bond between the princess and the soldier was dangerous. They said the princess was no longer fully herself, and that Ethan's blood might have changed her forever. That night, Queen Marielle called both of them to her private chamber. She looked tired, her crown resting lightly on her head. "The council is restless," she said. "They think your power, Evelyn, is too strange to trust. And they think your soldier might one day replace the nobles who guard this throne," Evelyn replied softly. "They may fear us, mother, but we can show them that this bond is not a curse." Ethan bowed his head. "If my presence brings danger to her, I'll leave quietly." The queen looked at him with sharp eyes. "And if you leave, what then? My daughter will face men who already plot against her." "No, Ethan. I think your place is by her side." Evelyn's eyes softened with gratitude. The next days passed in tension. Nobles arrived from nearby lands, pretending to offer gifts but bringing questions and suspicion. Some asked how Evelyn had survived the poison. Some demanded to see the soldier who had shared his blood. One afternoon, during a gathering in the Great Hall, one of the lords stood and shouted, "This is no miracle. This is trickery. The princess carries the blood of a stranger. How can she rule us now?" The hall went silent. Queen Marielle started to speak, but Evelyn raised her hand. She turned slowly to face the nobles and the guards, who now leaned forward, waiting. "My blood may not be as pure as before," she said, "but what is purity if it cannot save life? If my blood now carries the power to heal, then it is a gift, not a poison. And this man, Ethan Ward, did not weaken the crown. He made it stronger." Her words hit the crowd like thunder. Some bowed their heads in shame. Others whispered in fear. But when she walked down from the throne and took Ethan's hand, even the loudest voices grew quiet. Later, after the meeting ended, Evelyn stood with Ethan in the palace gardens. The evening air smelled of roses, and the fountain's water shone under the moonlight. "Did I do right?" she asked. "You spoke the truth," Ethan said. "That's always right." She looked at him for a long time. "People will tell stories about this day. Some will say you are a hero. Some will say, I am cursed." He smiled faintly. "Stories will change, but the truth stays the same. We saved each other. Weeks turned into months. The violence that had burned the land began to fade. Villages were rebuilt, roads cleared, and trade returned. People spoke of the princess who carried the blood of a soldier and healed the sick with her touch. Many came to her gates for help, and she never turned them away. Ethan stayed beside her, leading the guards and protecting the borders. Wherever they went, peace followed slowly behind them. Years later, new songs filled the taverns. They sang of a man with ordinary blood and a princess with a heart strong enough to share it. No one argued about royal lines or noble names anymore. People found meaning in simple things: loyalty, mercy, courage. Evelyn and Ethan walked in the palace gardens often, the same place where their friendship had first turned into something deeper. She no longer wore her crown every day. She said a ruler ruled best with open hands, not a heavy head. Looking at the sunset one evening, Ethan said, "Remember that broken field where we first met? How could I forget?" She smiled. "That was the day everything began." "It was also the day everything changed," Ethan replied. "Not just for us, but for everyone." She nodded. "Yes, because when blood and heart meet, kingdoms are never the same again." And so their story became a legend, told not as a tale of war, but as a story of two hearts bound by one act of courage. It reminded people that even in the darkest times, a single selfless choice could bring light strong enough to change the world forever.